Ready to kick off,
Hello,
Josh?
everybody. Yep, sorry. Hello, everybody, and thanks for joining today. I'm Josh Tolkien. I'm the director of the Maryland chapter of the Sierra Club, and I really appreciate everybody joining today to learn a little bit more about the Brighter Tomorrow Act and SolarAPP Plus. We're thrilled to be joined by speakers from the SolarAPP Foundation, from the Maryland Energy Administration, and Rosa Hance, who's a contractor supporter with the Maryland chapter of the Sierra Club. I'm going to be doing a very quick overview and introduction, and then I will be passing it off to some of the other speakers. Rosa, do you mind going to the next slide? So I don't think I need to talk a lot about why solar energy is important, but I wanted to touch on it to give context to the rest of the presentation. Why solar energy? First and foremost, Maryland has an ambitious goal of achieving 14.5% solar energy by the year 2030. Solar energy is clean, renewable, and climate friendly, so it is both a mandate as well as a very important public policy goal. But perhaps even more importantly, solar installed in the state of Maryland provides much needed energy generation here in the state that can reduce congestion, help address our state's energy demands by placing the energy generation closer to where the energy consumption is. And solar tends to bring more localized economic development benefits and job creation. So for this webinar today, we are not trying to convince you that solar is important, but rather to begin to hone in on the important public policies working to advance solar and how they might impact your jurisdiction. Solar costs have been fluctuating significantly in the last year or so, from supply chain issues going back to COVID, as well as complex federal changes in federal policy. However, there are some items that local and state jurisdictions have control over and can impact. Rooftop solar is 3 times cheaper to install in Australia than in the United States. And one of the really interesting and significant factors is the impact of local permitting processes. Rosa, next slide, please. So this chart compares a variety of the costs in Australia to the United States. We were having a chat beforehand about what caused some of the difference in the costs, and I will admit I can't bring that information in, though maybe some of the later speakers can. Why are the panels cheaper to purchase in Australia? Why is the mounting cheaper? But most of the costs are proportional. The one cost that is often overlooked is the cost of the process, the permitting, the project management, and the customer care. That is a key part of the process that's influenced by local jurisdictions. Most of those jurisdictions developed those permitting processes as extensions from existing permitting processes related to home and building construction. They haven't always been evaluated as to how effective or efficient they are. But we do know that jurisdictions that have more streamlined, more sophisticated permitting processes are saving significant amounts of money in the installation of solar, and that ultimately is creating savings for customers. Next slide, Rosa. Which brings us to the Brighter Tomorrow Act of 2024. This landmark piece of legislation was passed by the General Assembly and signed by the governor, and it has several really important policies which impact solar in the state. I'm going to touch on the few of them and then dive into the last. First, it implements a 3-year solar renewable energy credit multiplier. A solar renewable energy credit, or SREC, is the additional economic value that the state and the Public Service Commission place on energy that's generated from solar. It's a way to give it a real market reflection of the benefit it brings via clean energy. Previous to this act, any solar energy, whether it came from a rooftop system or a larger community solar system or commercial roof, or a solar farm or ground-mounted farm, they got the same value. However, many people and industry folks were advocating, as was Sierra Club, that we needed to place a higher value on rooftop solar because of the benefits it brings. It's more distributed, it helps place more opportunity in the hands of individuals. And so this multiplier actually gives an additional 50% credit for rooftop solar. And that increased SREC value is one of the things that tends to influence the price of solar panel installation. I believe that the Public Service Commission is still working out some of the final details, but when that goes into effect, we will likely see a positive economic impact on the cost of solar. I don't know if that will make solar actually appear to go down because there's a lot of other stuff going on, but it's our hope that that makes solar more economical. Secondly, that it expanded the financial incentives for eligible residents to go with solar through the Maryland Solar Access Program. And then lastly, it did require Maryland jurisdictions to use a solar permitting software to automate the process. Originally, the legislation, I think, actually said use SolarAPP. There are a few other options out there, but SolarAPP Plus is the prevailing leader in this particular field. The idea being that this was one thing that we could control to streamline and make universal the adoption of this tool that helps cut costs in the permitting realm. So the overall message is there are improved state financial incentives. We should see additional financial incentives coming through the SREC multiplier. And to meet that demand, it's important for jurisdictions to make the shift to SolarAPP Plus or another solar permitting software. And we wanted to do this presentation today to share some critical information with local jurisdictions and offer support however we might be able to. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rosa Hance, who has been contracting with the Sierra Club to help provide more education, support, and resources to jurisdictions looking to make this shift. Thank you so much for having me today, Rosa, and take it away.
Thanks so much. And thanks to everybody who's here. You know, the Brighter Tomorrow Act is a large piece of legislation, and it has, you know, as Josh was talking about, a lot of different components, right, that impact the solar market at large in Maryland. And, you know, in addition to the ones Josh mentioned, it's got some prevailing wage requirements so that certain like larger scale projects are going to see those economic benefits. It's got additional personal property tax exemptions for certain types of projects. But what we are going to focus on today with the purpose of this webinar, you know, primarily directed towards local jurisdictions, helping you all adopt the solar permitting software that is required by this legislation. We're diving in on the highlighted bullet here because that's our primary thing, but happy to talk to folks with questions about Brighter Tomorrow Act throughout. And feel free as we're going through this to place questions in the chat, use the Q&A feature. We've got a wonderful experts and you know, folks from different parts of the implementation of the Brighter Tomorrow Act here joining us today. So, you know, we definitely treasure your questions as we go along. And we'll come back to anything that we haven't covered. So I'm gonna turn over next and kind of bring onto the screen here Patrick from SolarAPP Foundation. He and we're gonna tag team and go back and forth and talk a little bit about, you know, why SolarAPP, what are we talking about, and what are some of the challenges that the Brighter Tomorrow Act is looking to solve. So
Great.
Patrick, are you able?
I'm
Yeah,
here. Can you
great.
all hear me? Yeah, thanks, Rosa. Thanks, Josh, for
Yeah.
teeing that up as well. Hi, everybody. I'm Patrick Hayakawa, the Jurisdiction Support Officer with the SolarAPP Foundation. We're an independent nonprofit. This technology was built by the Department of Energy, U.S. Department of Energy, by your tax dollars, and through a group called NREL, the National Renewable Energy Lab. And now the foundation is the one charged with making that technology available, its continued operation and maintenance and quality control. And included in that is education and outreach to permitting jurisdictions across the country who are eligible to utilize it at no cost. So the purpose of this slide, Josh did a nice job teeing up why legislation like the Brighter Tomorrow Act, it supports Maryland's very ambitious energy goals, including renewable energy, but just energy overall with rising demand, right? Um, it also thereby helps residents, your constituents, have lower energy costs and more energy options if they choose to pursue renewable goals. The point of this slide is that what we think is, so those are sort of two constituencies there with the state as a whole with energy, macro energy goals, individual consumers. We think a third part of the beneficiary of the SolarAPP technology when deployed correctly are the permitting offices themselves, their leadership, their staff, and their technicians. We know from experience, I know there's some permit staff professionals on the call. I'd be curious their experience too. We know from experience, this is not a state issue. This is not a local issue. Nationwide, local government are burdened with consistent challenges, poor quality plans submitted by those contractors, frequent cancellations, revisions, difficulty hiring and keeping qualified permit techs. That can all be compounded by inconsistent requirements, complex requirements, changing requirements. They vary by county to county, town to town sometimes. That can cause confusion for installers, particularly maybe if there's a new installer or a smaller business that doesn't have experience in your jurisdiction trying to compete. All of that leads to higher rates of inspection failure, poor quality workmanship in the field, and ultimately that's unsafe for your constituents and at least a higher cost. So Josh showed that comparison slide of cost in Australia, permitting inefficiency, poor quality submissions at the outset, and the related delays is a big attribution for those discrepancies in costs. So we think we take our job really seriously of serving sort of that dual mandate of keeping things easy and efficient for consumers, but also ultimately safe. We can talk more later, but SolarAPP is a community safety tool, and we see a lot of trust and a need to be really kind of in close communication and tight communication with those permitting offices and how they work and bring some of the benefits of automation to bear on their processes.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Patrick. You know,
Yeah.
I think that it's really important to note like what, I want to dive into what exactly is SolarApp, right? What is the product that we're talking about? And,
Yeah.
I'm contracting the Sierra Club. I'm not a salesperson here. That's not part of my role. But I think it's important to understand because I've talked to folks who are like, "Oh, SolarApp sounds neat. Can I download it? Is that like on the Google Play
Mhm.
or iTunes? Like, where do I find it?" We're like, "Oh, no, 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 no. SolarApp is actually a tool that a local jurisdiction uses and a contractor uses. It's not like, if I'm not a solar installer, I don't actually have to use it myself, but I think it's important for our context to just like talk about what is it, right? So
Yeah.
SolarApp stands for Solar Automated Permit Processing Plus, because there's other clean energy technologies, right? So the home battery system I have in my garage, inspection and permitting process for that would have been included had we had SolarApp when I installed mine. Um, so, what SolarApp is, and obviously, Patrick, you're the expert on this, so you can, support as we're going through here. But it's a standardized plan review software, right? So it's running compliance checks and processing the whole building permit approvals for those rooftop solar systems. And I think it's really wonderful that, we're adding battery storage into the mix because that's the perfect complement to, renewable energy so you can use it later on. So what does it do exactly, right? It reviews those standard internationally trusted codes that local building and electric and fire codes have in their systems, right? It performs hundreds of safety and compliance checks, which is really incredible. It issues an instant approval and inspection checklist so that at the end of the day, you have a written document, you know exactly what the inspector is going to be looking for and exactly, what you should be inspecting. So there's kind of an equal expectation, I think, on both ends of the permit process, I think is really meaningful. And then, of course, there's still local involvement in the process. This does not like automate all human interaction out of the process. So, um, you know, there's still workmanship, there's adherence to design, all that important stuff incorporated in. Anything else that you want to add in there, Patrick? Or
No, no, that was
you
great.
want
Thank
to,
you, Rosa.
yeah,
And I see Janet's very excellent question. So I'm going to add one piece of color commentary to Rosa's, and I want to hit Janet's question real quick. So if you don't mind, Rosa, actually staying on that slide for
yeah,
just a moment. I think the important thing, I know there's some permitting staff on the call, but I'm going to assume that some people that are not as familiar maybe with the process. The thing to know is that what we're specifically talking about is plan review. Okay, so SolarAPP is not claiming or presuming to be an end-to-end solution for all of a jurisdiction's permitting needs. It can be used to intake information, right? But we're not really very involved in the inspection process. We can talk about that. What we're really talking about is plan review. And what Brighter Tomorrows Act calls for is, can your office apply automation, right? So in most jurisdictions across the country, the current standard is an installer, if they want to install a PV system, we're talking residential PV systems on a home. Like if you want to add one to your house, they drop the plans. And essentially in many jurisdictions, they can email them or place them on the desk of the plan review team and say, here you go, tell me if I did a good job, right? The burden is on the staff to review that manually. Often takes half an hour, 45 minutes, an hour to do what we call that plan review. Does this meet our local code? Does it meet our local zoning? Does it meet international best standards for structural, structural integrity, electrical, things like that? What we're doing is we're saying, by having the installer input certain information into the SolarAPP system, we can do that check for you and see if it comports with those international codes. Okay, so we're not displacing or replacing that manual pathway. What Brighter Tomorrow actually says is you have to present to the residents some automated option. Okay, so of the 300 jurisdictions across the country where SolarAPP is presently live, most of them say, hey, installer, if you like the manual way and you don't mind waiting a day, 2 days, 3 weeks in some cases, 4 weeks, 6 weeks in some cases, you can always continue to do that. If you really know your stuff, and in a half an hour, you can go through the SolarAPP questionnaire and answer those questions, which we validate in real time. We didn't really mean this to be a demo, so I'm not going to go into too much detail of how we do that. But Janet, suffice it to say, I will send you a link for one of our standing demos. You can see what we ask them and how we validate it in real time, meaning we're not relying on their attestation. We're not taking their word for it. We're actually doing the math. When they say, here's how our electrical system is set up, we're reviewing, okay, are those modules compatible with the other parts of the system according to UL best practices, right? Things like that. So we can show you more about that if people are interested, but that's what we're trying to do, is for those most basic and standard rooftop solar systems, provide an automated process that then can give permitting staff time back to focus on those more complex systems, because we're not claiming that all systems are appropriate for automated review. And that's probably a
yeah.
good time for the next slide, Rosa.
Yeah, and I'll just say, like, as a former teacher in my past life, I think the comparison to make is like, imagine you're giving an assignment and it's an essay, right? And the person could add all sorts of pictures and comments, and you, at the end of the day, you have to spend a while like reading the essay and looking at the pictures and deciding how to grade it, right? this brings us into like a fill in the blank question, multiple
Yeah.
choice question,
Yep.
right? So it's a different type of test you're taking, but it moves the whole process along for the grader and and the work on the front
Yep.
end.
It does. It sort of looks like a Google form. It's like a Google form on steroids where we're not just taking their word for it. We're calculating their inputs and seeing if those are code compliant. So the important point of this slide, Rosa, one thing I will not correct, but I just put a different emphasis on. You said for jurisdictions to use. It's true in a sense that jurisdictions use SolarAPP in the sense that they incorporate our technical tool, but when adopted, I think it's important for people to understand the jurisdiction and their staff are not the primary user of the tool. In many jurisdictions, and I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but in many jurisdictions, staff actually forget that SolarAPP is in use because they're not interfacing with it every day because they don't need to. What you're actually doing when your jurisdiction is using SolarAPP, you're posting a link on your permitting page saying, hey, good news. If you want to apply the conventional way you can, if you want to apply for DIY guided automated review, go here. So you're really directing contractors to this pathway. So that's what this slide explains, which is step one, they submit an application. If it's code compliant, we are then sending all those related documents to you and issuing a permit on your behalf. And we're skipping a bunch of steps. Most importantly is some of the setup where we talk about your existing workflow. We talk about your local requirements. SolarAPP is not a one size fits all solution. We're trying to standardize and streamline the process, but we're not trying to change your current workflow as a jurisdiction or change what you review for, what your code definition of code compliance is. We're trying to bring automation to your current best practices, not tell you how to define code compliance or how to do plan review.
That's a really important clarification. Thank you, Patrick. So let's tag team here some of the benefits. I imagine you're already thinking that you can envision some of these benefits, right? One, that it's free for the local government to use. That's always helpful. That we've got an optional permit pathway. I kind of picture this like a TSA pre, where you still have your security, you can wait in the line, right? But if you do the TSA pre, you're moving ahead pretty quickly. You're getting to the front of the line. You're definitely making it on the plane. So I like to use that analogy. Um, I appreciate all what we're talking about safety. Patrick, if you want to jump in and talk about like the predictability and consistency, because I think that's really important on both ends, right? The user end and um, the contractor end that might be working across multiple jurisdictions and being able to have the same exact process to be able to
Yeah.
often say, I'm working in Prince George's County and I'm working in Montgomery County and I'm working in, Howard County. Like I can use SolarAPP for all three of them. That seems to me to be a really helpful aspect.
It's huge, Rosa, and I'll say something on predictability, and I want to come back to safety real briefly too. But predictable is important, and one reason I want to commend MEA in the state of Maryland for their statewide leadership. There are plenty. We can look at the map later of where SolarAPP is most widely adopted. People like there are plenty of individual jurisdictions, large cities, rural counties, rural towns, suburban areas, for different reasons have adopted SolarAPP. But Rosa is spot on that a state and a region and a community get the biggest benefits where I was in local economic development for 15 years. And so I understand sort of being, small budgets and trying to do a lot of things and serve your community. In economic development, we called it agglomeration. It's a fancy word saying more benefits when more similar processes or similar types of approaches are clustered together. So what that means is when one state has a standardized option or one region has a standardized option across multiple counties, across multiple towns, that makes things clearer for residents and for installers who are operating in those areas. So all this is sort of a fancy way of saying like there's a compound effect, there's a network effect that as more individual communities sign on, we hope that they save time and maintain and actually we have data that shows actually increase their code compliance and safety profile. But so there's that individual benefit, but we actually see prices come down as a region and more installers able to compete and operate, which ultimately increases choice and brings down costs for consumers. So we get really excited, not just when one adopts, but then when dominoes sort of start to fall and two or three say, oh, that worked for them, then we should take a look at this. So that's what we're really excited to begin to be seeing in Maryland as we get more of a critical mass. That's where Marylanders are going to have the widest and most durable benefits, I think.
Yeah, I think that's so true. Um, yeah, I'm not sure if we want to get into this, too much for time, but Patrick and I were talking beforehand about how, solar is in a interesting place in our kind of national conversation. Obviously, there's understandable concern that we're going to see homeowner tax credits start to be phased out, at the end of this year. And so that's going to have an impact on the solar market. From my perspective, I think then it reinforces to me that we have to move as fast as possible to get compliant right now, because, people need to be able to get the rooftop installed this year if possible. And how long does it generally take, Patrick, for jurisdictions to sign up? I hear is like little as a week or maybe even
Week.
less. Like it's
Yeah, that's one of the things we've really tried to do is this doesn't involve software coding. It doesn't involve a deep technical integration. We've really tried to build it to be ready to use off the shelf, regardless of a jurisdiction's current workflow, and sort of fold it into that. So we've had many jurisdictions get live with SolarAPP in as little as 6 or 7 business days. But when Rose and I were thinking about this, and I drew up this little graphic based on the home analytics industry report following the passage of federal legislation a couple weeks back now. I thought we'd share this. If anyone wants to see that full report, I'd be glad to share it with you. I don't know the background of many of the people on this call, but I know from many other solar enthusiasts, immediately after this bill passed, there was a question of, oh, what is this? Is this the cliff? Is this catastrophic? Right? Is there even a point, right, of pursuing this work? And I think those were all valid questions in the run up to that bill. The takeaway of this home analytics industry point is to show the answer is no. All is not lost. Yes, 2026 is going to be a down year. You're going to have some carry forward, is what we're trying to express here in the remaining months of 2025 as people try to get more projects complete, right, in line with that 30% tax credit that's going to go away at December 31st, 2025. But then what you also are going to have is the lease credits continue into end of 2027. And the basic forecast is that 2026 will be a down year, but then the remaining 2027, 28, 29, all in the mid-teens of year-over growth, which is going to more than make up over time for the down year of 2026. In that meantime, you're going to have a lot of shuffling. You're going to have businesses go out of business. You're going to have suppliers contract. You're going to have less adoption in some areas, all of which is to say, the more we can do, I guess I can't, I was going to circle, but the more we can sort of do collectively as policymakers, as local leaders, in sort of in between, right where that cursor is, where the owner credits end and the year of 2026, things will turn up. Whether they turn up sooner or later will depend a lot on this local levers that folks can pull. Can we eliminate soft costs? Can we find other ways to bring down costs of these projects so that it's only a matter of time? The industry will find ways to adapt and be competitive in the long run. How can we help homeowners pivot faster and make this easier for people, especially in the light of the nationwide Solar for All deployment, which is coming nationwide as we speak, in different ways. So
absolutely. I think, whoop. And so speaking of nationwide, we don't have to spend too long on this, but I think it's just so meaningful to see how widely this tool is being used, and then let's talk about how it's going so far in Maryland. So Patrick, I know you said
yeah,
there was a few new ones.
real quick on this slide. I think the point here is that as I said a few minutes back, jurisdictions are adopting for different reasons. Early on in the SolarAPP life cycle, many jurisdictions in the Southwest and the Sun Belt there, Southern California, were adopting because they had backlogs, right? They said, oh, we have a big problem. How do we get this backlog? Now we're seeing more um, uh, uh, diverse in terms of the weather, climate, economics, places like Ohio, places like Florida, places like Texas now, and they're not adopting because they have backlogs. They're adopting because regionally they've got similar energy goals as expressed by Josh earlier in the call. Or as I had one building official say to me a couple weeks, they're just like, oh, like you mean we've been doing our laundry by hand and we can be using a washing machine? I was like, yeah, that's basically it. They want their time back. They've got other fish to fry. They've got other things. And once they review it, they say, um, we didn't know this solution existed, and that's another standpoint. So you don't need to be the highest volume permitting jurisdiction for this to make sense, and that's what you see here. You've got Montgomery County, Maryland, where it's been in use now for a good bit, and 4 or 5 other jurisdictions that now are in the process of getting live with the tool.
Yeah. So it's really exciting.
Yeah.
And that's, that leads us into the big questions of, who can you turn to, right? In certain jurisdictions you can reach out to ask more questions. And then really, I'd like to open it up pretty soon to questions, but I thought I'd start us thinking really about those questions. And the most common question I've been getting over the past several months is, does my local government actually need SolarAPP? And resoundingly and across very different kinds of issues and problems across the state, I believe, and we've seen that the answer is yes. Um, We've heard from folks across the state who are frustrated with very inconsistent requirements for contractors and, differences in the way a plan might be reviewed from even one reviewer to another in the same jurisdiction. Every local government we understand is stressed and cost constrained and limited in the work hours. And we have some jurisdictions that are really struggling with long work times. And I think as long wait times. And I think as Patrick noted, though, it's not just the jurisdictions that, maybe if your jurisdiction actually is turning around your permits really fast, that's amazing and incredible and kudos on that. But there are usually a few different kinds of, solar applications, right, that are more time consuming. We would want the most amount of, time spent on those. And by offering SolarAPP as that TSA pre-check lane for you, you can focus staff time on the more complex projects and leave those routine ones that a contractor might be really happy to just like, oh, yep, did the SolarAPP, see you on the other side, right? And all of that, right? It increases the volume, adoption, and honestly, it makes homeowners happy to know that when they are enthusiastic about installing that solar and battery backup, that they can do it in a prompt way and get the benefits sooner. And of course, with the compliance deadline of the Maryland State Law Brighter Tomorrow Act requiring all jurisdictions to use a solar permitting software and to automate certain aspects of this process, the great news is that we, in this legislation, not only did it require it, but it actually offers support for that process. And so, this requirement does not require that jurisdictions like write their own code or do like reinvent the wheel, right? Here's an off the shelf, like ready to use, vetted across the country, system. And Maryland has grant funding to support the local jurisdiction soft costs of implementation. So you want to host a training, you want to have like other we want to bring in different parts of your process. You want to really work hard on this. MEA has a wonderful grant program that we're going to get to talk about that helps fund all of that. So it's not, I'm really excited and pleased that Maryland is invested so heavily and strongly in making these changes because I think it's going to have a wonderful benefit. And with that, I want to turn it over to two guests from the Maryland Energy Administration joining us today, which is so wonderful and we're so grateful. Brandon and Emma, welcome and thank you both for being here today.
Thank you so much, Rosa. Really happy to be here. I'm Emma Stoney, everyone. I'm joined here by my supervisor and section chief, Brandon Bowser. He leads the entire clean energy and resilience team at MEA, which covers all solar and other resiliency efforts. But for the purpose of today's conversation, we'll be talking about SolarAPP, which is a program that I run. We have just launched this program. It is really in response to the industry and response to the Brighter Tomorrow Act of 2024. We understand that it can be challenging for local governments and jurisdictions to comply with a non-funded mandate. So we did our best to make this mandate something that could be funded. So we applied for federal funding back in 2022 or 2023 to allow us to actually fund this type of initiative. So we did run the program this past year as a pilot, and from that we were able to award two grants, one to Prince George's County and one to Macomb County, and we learned some things from that process, and we've updated the program for our fiscal year 2026. The program is open as of today. It is you're able to apply to it. If you have any questions about it, you can let me know. My contact information is also available on the webpage, and I'll put that information in the chat. But the program's open to all local authority having jurisdictions, so all Maryland counties and all municipalities who do residential solar permitting. The deadline is January 31st, 2026. It is a first come, first served program, and we will be reviewing applications as we receive them. We tend to do a two-step process. So we'll review your application, and if you're awarded, we'll send you a commitment letter confirming that you have a commitment of funds. Following that, we'll actually go through with a grant agreement, which will outline all of the activities that you're doing. And for this program, we will do a base award for it. Since the program is free to install, that does sound like it should be, a no-cost program, but there are always hidden costs associated with doing that and changing procedures and offices. So we have a minimum base award of $10,000 for jurisdictions, and then we have a scale factor of just under $1 per household serviced by that jurisdiction, and we'll cap the awards at about $100,000. And that's because, based on what we found from talking to other states who have implemented similar programs, tends to not be anything that exceeds $100,000. However, should there be certain special circumstances, you are always welcome to reach out to me with the specific concerns of your jurisdiction. And under this program, you can do a number of things. So you can figure out how you're going to train your staff, anything that you might need to do for fee adjustments. SolarAPP does have a fee for contractors to use. So if a local jurisdiction also has a fee for their residential solar permitting, some folks want to, kind of tweak that and modify it. And we know that that requires staff time to actually look into what that process would look like. We also will provide cost to cover, staff time working on IT resources, working with NREL specifically, working with folks who are experts on getting this integrated. So the only thing about this is you can't use this funding for anything other than SolarAPP. It's just for the implementation of SolarAPP. So I know there are other softwares out there that can do maybe similar things, but in our review, the reason we have a grant program for this, and this program is federally funded, the reason for that is because it was, developed by the Department of Energy, developed by their National Renewable Energy Lab. And that's really the reason. It's a trusted, really well designed system, and we've got support from the SolarAPP Foundation and NREL. They do also host a number of these really great information sessions. We'll walk you through how to actually implement it, integrate it, what it looks like, interfacing with it. So we have funding for it, and there is always support from the NREL team and Patrick with the SolarAPP Foundation. We've got a lot of money for it. We've got $3.9 million, and we are ready to give it out to jurisdictions who are looking to improve their residential solar applications. So with that, I'll pass it back over to you, Rosa.
Thanks so much. And yeah, that's all great news. I mean, we don't want to leave any federal government funds on the table. This is really important, and you know, that's um, it's key. And so I want to close this out so we have enough time for questions. I see that there might be a few in the chat. So after this slide, I'll take it off chat and we can all see each other and go through the questions. But I want to leave us with kind of the conclusion note here. What are the actions that local governments will, we recommend that local governments take to comply by the August 1st deadline? One really simple registration process to adopt SolarAPP to get into that onboarding queue, like Patrick was talking about with a number of our other jurisdictions, to make local permitting processes for residential rooftop solar and home energy systems more efficient. And if you're one of the local residents on this, who decide to join our educational webinar today, we encourage you to reach out to your jurisdictions, express your support, share what you've learned, right? And help them feel supported in adopting this and new technology and complying with state law on time, because your voices as residents are really important too. And then second, of course, not to forget, definitely complete the MEA grant application, because getting funding to support this is key. But I wanted to separate those two, because it's not like you have to do one and then the other, or like these are two separate things that we here at the Sierra Club are encouraging jurisdictions to take. You can register first and apply later, although we encourage you to apply now, right? Because the sooner you apply, the sooner you get that commitment letter and, get those funds flowing. So, when you get that funding, it can help you implement things even more successfully. And lastly, and very importantly, we want to continue to hear from you all. I'd love to hear about your successes, your challenges. Again, as Sierra Club, we're independent advocates, so I'm happy to talk through anything, because our goal is to just make it easier for everyone, residents, businesses, local governments, the whole system here, to adopt these renewable and healthy, clean, climate-friendly systems. So with that, I'll stop sharing for a second so that we can see each other and see some of our questions. We have someone in the Q&A who asked about expanding, which is great. Okay, it looks like that's been answered. Any questions folks see? I think there's one question or any points that we haven't raised here. We have someone asking about when the next product demonstration is, and someone asking about whether or not we have anyone from Prince George's County here. I'm not sure on the attendee end if we have folks from Prince George's County, but perhaps Patrick, you can help.
Yeah, I saw that question. It's a good question. I can't speak, disclaimer, I can't speak for any specific county. I haven't been personally involved in that onboarding process. Janet's question though about I'll speak broadly to this, I'll generalize this question. Will county residents have different experiences if they're in municipalities versus unincorporated parts of the county? That sort of speaks to our comment earlier about why you can bring a more standard experience and streamline things. The more localities within a region are using a similar platform. Again, not that we would impose or require the same code interpretation or the same zoning requirements across the tool. The tool is built to accommodate those local unique circumstances. But again, I'm not speaking for Prince George's. I don't know their implementation plans. But for many counties, Janet, yes, if you had a county that had adopted SolarAPP, but many municipalities within that county that had not. If they're their own permitting jurisdiction, as you have now, right, you would continue to have disparate processes. So typically, when a county does adopt SolarAPP, they are adopting on behalf of the unincorporated communities in their county. So we're not changing where permitting authorities have jurisdiction or where they're doing review, and they would then tell us what are the locations of the areas where they're not the permitting authority, and we would remove those. So that's an example of our quality control is if an installer inputs a project address, we would instantly validate, okay, is that an address where the installer is licensed to do business? And is it an address that's actually within the boundaries of the jurisdiction where they are applying for a permit? They would not be able to proceed through the tool if both of those were not the case. Those are the examples of the quality control and input specifications that if people want to come to a platform demonstration, that's the link I put in the chat for tomorrow afternoon, and they occur bi-weekly.
Thanks so much. Yeah. Emma, do you have some additional thoughts on this?
Yeah, I do. Patrick, I really appreciate what you said about the standardization because that is such a key about SolarAPP is making it a standardized system for folks. Something I did want to add, which is, something I'm really, really happy that our program offers, is the ability to get technical assistance with your current permitting software. If you are trying to hire someone to actually take a deep dive at your current permitting process for electrical permits and incorporating SolarAPP, and you don't know, because there are two different types of SolarAPP integrations. You can either integrate it into your current process, or it can just be a standalone system where you just click and upload items. So, certain jurisdictions like Prince George's County, for example, they have been a case study across, the entire country for being very challenging for permits. So Prince George's County being a really large county, they do have a pretty sophisticated permitting structure. And when they were looking at SolarAPP, that was something that they looked to us and said, is it possible for us to use grant funds to kind of explore how we could integrate this in our current system? And that is an eligible use of funding under this program to look at what could be specific to your county and unique for your county to make this the most useful for not only you, but for the folks who are using this. So for the contractors and the installers to make it streamlined across county lines and jurisdictions. So just want to include that because I know everyone on here, you all have different operations in your own local jurisdiction and want to really express that this program is designed to work with you and meet you where you are.
That's really, really helpful, Emma. I see another question came in from Grace. How long does it take to train staff to use SolarAPP? That's a great question. And I think earlier on, I saw she's coming from the local permitting side. So we're talking jurisdiction staff, not, solar installer staff, for example.
Yeah,
Any
Rose,
thoughts on that?
I can speak to that. So Grace, thanks for your question. The answer is a little different, perhaps, depending on permit staff, plan reviewers, right, versus in the field inspectors. So because those plan reviewers and permit staff are, again, are not the primary user of the tool, their job doesn't really change much. There's some differences, as Emmy said, if we're doing a fully integrated versus standalone. That's a very minimal training, and most people feel pretty comfortable with how to know that. Did I get an email that a SolarAPP project came through? Do I know where that information now sits in my GovTech system? That can usually be done with an hour or two of training and ongoing support with our team. That's an important thing. Is once a jurisdiction is live with SolarAPP, it's not okay, that's it. The largest part of our staff is actually our customer support team, both for the installer side. If they have a question or need support, we pride ourselves in being really quick on both sides of the equation. The answer is a little different for the inspection team, field inspection team, because we do want them to be familiar and comfortable with what we call the outputs, the approval documents that SolarAPP provides that may be different than what they're typically used to. So for that reason, we have pre-recorded both installer trainings, how to apply for a SolarAPP project, and inspection trainings. Also in an area like Maryland, where we have and continue to anticipate a high rate of adoption by jurisdictions, we are very likely to schedule in-person trainings or on-site trainings for either for permitting staff or for field inspection staff this fall or at the request of jurisdictions. And the beautiful thing is that MEA's grant, those are the exact types of costs. If I'm understanding, Emma, I don't want to speak for the program, correct me if I'm wrong, that an office like Grace's could get reimbursed. Because again, there's no hard costs directly to SolarAPP. We don't charge anything. It's going to be things like your staff time, any software integrations, as Emma referenced. So Grace, if you are specifically saying, okay, what about my staff? This is how many people we have. This is the adoption we're considering. Then our onboarding team can say, yeah, we think 5 hours here and an hour here and 6 hours there. That could be the type of information that we've provided in the past for you to provide a comprehensive application for your grant to make sure that those are all fully accounted for. Sound right, Emma?
Great question.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, Patrick is perfect. Thanks.
Oh, this is great. Thank you all for attending. Are there any other questions, last thoughts and comments? We can definitely get the slides out to attendees. Feel free to schedule follow-up conversations with any of us on the call. We'll provide our contact info and a follow-up email. Anything else?
This is Brandon Bowser with MEA. Sorry, I've been quiet this whole time just because Emma has done a fantastic job at selling the program. She is your point person on this. But yes, please, for local jurisdictions, please leverage this program. This is meant to help you, adopting more streamlined, automated solar permitting process. It benefits you, it benefits your residents, and it is our intent that this money will help you with all of the costs necessary to adopt the free-to-use software and get everything you need to get that in place. Especially given the Brighter Tomorrow Act's mandate on the solar permitting software. This is meant to help you get to that point. So please leverage it. Reach out to us if you have questions. We're here and ready to help. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, it's been great having everybody today. I don't know, Josh, if there's anything else we have left to share with our couple minutes left. It's been great.
Actually, yeah. So here's a small thing to share. The advocacy for the adoption of the grant program and for SolarAPP Plus came in part from hearing from some jurisdictions that they were getting an increased amount of solar applications and finding that it was taking a lot of time. I know that smaller jurisdictions, and I saw a few were on this call, have a great voice through the Maryland Municipal League. But I also know that MML has a lot of different issues. So if any of you are dealing with any other challenges or constraints related to solar permitting and applications that maybe are related to, but not directly about SolarAPP Plus, please also feel free to reach out to Rosa. We would like to better understand anything that we can do to be helping local jurisdictions with solar permitting and applications, whether that's SolarAPP Plus or beyond. So I just wanted to extend an invitation to share your experience with us. I know Sierra Club is known as an advocacy organization, and we're strongly supportive of solar, but we also are passionate about making these systems work and making sure that the laws and the support system and the grants make it functional for local government. So we really appreciate you all coming on today, and we hope this is the beginning of a conversation. So please be in touch.
Absolutely. Have a great afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining.
Thank you.